There has to be some common sense.
Yes, sir. They have the car stopped at 10th and Ranch Michael Biden.
We still don't know who pulled the trigger. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the NYPD. You know, folks, this case in Henreyetta, Oklahoma is quite disturbing. And from an investigative standpoint, which was most of my career was spent in investigative units, every potential mistake that could be made was made. And we always used to have pride in ourselves that when we made an arrest on a case, that didn't mean the case was over. It means it just begun, and you had tons more investigation to do in order to find out what had occurred. So you would cross every T and dot every I. And the disturbing part of this case is that the local jurisdiction believed that their work was done. And that couldn't be further from the truth. So we know right now that because of that, they have basically been relieved of their duties and they have been replaced. And these are on the screen. You see the pictures of the young kids that, and also the mother that was involved here, Holly Guess. And we're hearing now that she was involved in this. And I'm not surprised at that at all. I'd like to know how she took this guy, Justin, excuse me, the perpetrator in this, McFadden. I mean, Jesse McFadden, how did she meet him? How did she take him under her wing? How did she allow him near her children? How did she just ingratiate herself with someone who just got out of prison and for a horrific crime? The Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation has taken control of the crime scene at the property in Okmulgee County. The Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation will now lead based on District Attorney Carol Iskey's request Friday, after the father of one victim expressed frustration with how potential evidence had been left unsecured at the property. An agency spokesman also confirmed its investigators stepped into leading the investigation on Friday. The Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation is now the lead agency in the case, and the investigation is ongoing. OSBI, Interim Public Information Officer, reported that Monday. Just horrific. We watched, we critiqued how this investigation went on. You could see the size of this crime scene. You know, some of the evidence that I would just like to go over, that they were so remiss in A, not invoicing, and B, not spotting and collecting it and appropriately collecting this evidence. That would mean the cell phones, swabbing them for DNA, some of the blood evidence, the fiber evidence, completely professionally photograph the location. It doesn't seem like any of those things were done. So after the fact, collecting the cell phones and the computers. Now that's just the beginning. The cell phones and the computers have to be forensically searched, which means every one of those cell phones and computers would need a search warrant to do so. So if they want to do this correctly, and not only was that not done, but they were left at the scene. Just horrific crime scene and investigative techniques there. And then information that's garnered from the cell phones and from the computers could open up an entirely new investigation, could just result in another huge case. You know, one of the things that we hear in life, the expression "birds of a feather flock together," and I couldn't agree with that anymore. You know, and the Jesse McFadden, who do you think he hung with? You think he hung with the president of the Chamber of Commerce? No, he's a criminal, and he's a very specific type of criminal. Who do you think he was hanging with? That's part of the investigation. We want to know. You know, I talk about on this, and everyone gets a big laugh. I use the term perpology, and that could not be more apropos than in this case. Jesse McFadden, we know who he is because he served 20 years in state prison. But who was he once he left state prison? What was he doing? Did he have a job? Who was he associating with? What does his cell phone tell us about him? Who were his friends? Did he have any friends other than this family here? How did he support himself? How is it that the criminal justice system, corrections, lost track of him, didn't know where he was? He should have been on parole. He got out 3 years early from a violent crime. So how is it that they didn't know where he was? How is it that he was not required to work a job? How is it that they weren't visiting him, going to his home and seeing what he was up to? A parole officer would have saw that house and immediately known it was a house of horrors. So yes, the criminal justice system, parole, corrections, the police, they take equal parts blame in this case. Horrific. The community that he was a member of, the SO community, you know, I don't know if I'm allowed to say that on YouTube. We all know what he was. He was an offender. And one of the biggest things that the investigators need to do is they need to interview the friends of the children, of these children here. They need to interview them. This wasn't a one-off. This wasn't a one-time situation. Kids came to their house. People have a tale to tell about what had occurred at that house. Of course, some of the things that they're collecting now is supposedly horrific pictures. And we've seen some of the video of this man here, the father, Justin Webster, the father of Ivy. He was the catalyst behind all of this, wanting to know more, visiting the crime scene and spotting his daughter's cell phone in the crime scene. How horrific is that? And the lackadaisical, the cavalier way one of the officers on the scene just said, "Oh, this case is over with," basically. I'm not quoting him, but in essence, that's what he said, that this case is over with. No, detective, if you are a detective, it's just begun. It's just begun. And if you were a professional investigator, you would know that. And for him to say, "Oh, it's over with. What do you want us to do?" We want you to do your job. And if you think it's over with, then you don't belong on a police department. I mentioned earlier that there was information, and I would assume, not just assume, Holly guessed the person on the bottom left picture, the mom of the top 3 children, and the wife of Jesse McFadden. They're getting information now that she was involved in this. So that would just make sense, because how could something so horrific as what occurred here take place without her blessing or without her knowing about it? And look, this went horribly badly, resulting in the murder of 6 people and the suicide of the perpetrator. But how do we know that there's not other victims on this rather large area home here. We will put up on the screen 2 ponds on that. Apparently, the Oklahoma Bureau of Investigation was going to search those ponds. All of a sudden, there was all kinds of new activity, drones, excavators going onto this land. Why was that not thought to be important right away, right early on in the investigation? As you do an investigation like this, you start getting answers to your questions. And sometimes and the evidence starts to come back as it's processed. Results of a DNA search of the crime scene. How but that entire crime scene basically should be swabbed all over the place for DNA. If there's blood on that scene and it's an unknown origin, it should be swabbed for DNA and put into the system. Fingerprint processing of the scene. Who was at that scene? There could have been other horrific criminals at that scene, just like Jesse McFadden. As I said, the old expression, birds of a feather flock together. That can't be more true than in a case like this. And when you see this father here, a broken man, just Justin Webster and his wife there, citizens of this country deserve much better from their police, a much better job, a much better investigation than they got here. What they got here was crap. It was absolute garbage. I'll speak the French word of garbage. It's garbage, the investigation they did. Horrific. And they deserve to be chastised for it because they did not do their job. They absolutely did not do their job. And I want to play a little bit of Justin Webster, who he was on Cuomo the other night on News Nation. I'm going to play a little bit of this, and you could just see a broken man, but a strong man, a man that advocated for his daughter and wasn't satisfied with the answers that he was receiving. And I'm going to play this right now. This was Cuomo from the other night.
Tasked with investigating last week's slumber party massacre. I actually don't know why we're calling that. I mean, this guy was a predator and he had access to kids who had kids over, and he wound up killing everybody and himself. The investigating agency has been asked to step aside. Why? Maybe because Justin Webster, father of a 14-year-old victim, Ivy Webster, visited the scene of the crime himself last week after sheriffs said the home was cleared. That's the only reason victims' families or anybody else would be allowed in a crime scene. And he found the father found a mountain of electronic evidence left behind, including the cell phone of his daughter that the cops missed. The scene of the crime, he says, was horrific. Chains, restraints, drugs, weapons all over the house. Justin also found a list of names and birth dates, potentially pointing to other victims the suspect may have planned to target.
You know, folks, that in itself, a list of victims, people that could have already been victimized. How do you not collect that? How do you not get detectives out to start talking to those people immediately? I guarantee you there will be hundreds of more cases from this crime scene. But how did the local police not think that they needed to do that?
Let's bring him in. This is so bizarre, especially with all the pain you're already dealing with. Justin, thank you for joining us. First, let's deal with Ivy's legacy. And you have a change.org petition that you want people to know about, and that matters most. So what is it?
We had her name is Ashley Mann. She's one of the residents here in Henreyetta. She's actually sex, she was an abused person herself also. And so this really meant a lot to her when this happened here in our small little town. And she took it upon herself to start drafting a petition And I asked her to come over so that way myself and my family could go over the petition and begin to add some other stuff that we thought we would want as a family of victims of a horrendous crime. So we basically just drafted it together, and she posted it on the change.org, and where we've given it to Congressman Fettgetter to read over so he understands what but basically the whole community here, and hopefully the rest of the state will jump on board. And then after that, we're asking the whole country to jump on board to start enacting some of these changes and to create a new law. And
You know, folks, most jurisdictions, just so you know, most jurisdictions have sex offender registries. So a mutt like this guy, McFadden, Jesse McFadden, he would be tracked once he was released from prison. And that, to me, that is the biggest huge mistake in this whole case. Why was he not assigned a parole officer? Why did a parole officer not visit his home and check on him? If a parole officer would have walked into that home and saw what was visible to anyone walking through there, he would have been remanded right back to prison. How could he explain the restraints, the chains, the wall restraints, all the different cell phones, photographs of children? Just horrific stuff. So look, the criminal justice system takes a huge hit on this, takes it right on the chin.
And we want to make sure that I think a big point for us was the name of the law. Most of these laws that are drafted in most states are named after one victim. And,
Right.
with all due respect to them, we wanted to come up with a law that protects all the victims. And here in Henreyetta, our mascot are the Knights. So we wanted to name the law the Knights Law. And I think that's a great name to protect all our little Knights that are victims and affected by this.
So let's go to the investigation. You went into the home, they said it was cleared, and they literally missed your daughter's cell phone.
Yes, so from my understanding is the sheriff's office, Okmulgee Sheriff's Office, was the point agency in the investigation. And they had contacted the OSBI here in Oklahoma to do a partial assistance. And as a partial assistance for the OSBI, they can only assist as far as what the sheriff's office wants them to assist in. And so when they were going through the house, the sheriff's office, I think there was maybe just a few of them inside the house with OSBI, and they were telling OSBI what they want to take and whatnot. So just to clear up that confusion between the sheriff's office and the OSBI did what they could as far as the sheriff's office leading them. The sheriff's office is the one that let us down not once, not twice, but 3 times now during this entire investigation. And it's become very, very frustrating.
What was your biggest concern after you walked through that house?
The biggest concern for me would be they completely missed the entire story. And basically what we're hearing is that, the sheriff's office, they took point out in the property where my daughters and the other victims' bodies were found. And after they found the bodies and the suspect, Jesse McFadden, they basically called off the rest of the investigation and the search of the house and the rest of the property. And obviously, as you've seen on K4 News, I had Kaylee Olivas with me as a reporter inside the house. She's the one who got most of that footage that I'm hoping the nation has seen by now.
We're seeing it. We're seeing it. We're going to show it. And obviously, hey, thank you for.
Folks, just horrific. One of the things, and we watch television, we watch News Nation, we watch Fox, we watch CNN, national TV stations. We've said on this podcast numerous times, the press can be your biggest friend or your biggest enemy. And in a case like this, I would 100% use the press to get this savage's picture out there. Get him out there with a public service announcement. If you recognize this mutt, what did he do? Are there any more victims out there? Has he tried to call you? Has he committed a crime against you? Get his picture out there. Extremely necessary. We can't even imagine how many people that he has victimized in this community. And that is so important. And again, getting back to this investigation, how did they let this go and just not investigate it any further? Lou Lemaraco, thank you for the $10 super sticker. Absolutely horrifying. The FBI needs to get involved immediately if they haven't already. Well, I think the FBI would get involved if it turns out that this case crossed state lines, which is potential because if there was any kind of child pornography, which obviously there was, he was sending pornographic pictures from prison, and they let this guy get out. And he was in for rape first degree, and he was sending out to a minor. He was sending out inappropriate, actually pornographic photos to a minor. So it's important to get his picture out there to the community. And you know something? Actually, her picture too, because we're finding out right now that she was involved also. What was her role in this? Was she just an enabler, or was she involved? Was she involved in it? There she is, Holly Guess. And top of her are children, Riley Elizabeth Allen, Michael James Mayo, and Tiffany Dorr Guests. And the other two girls were invited over that house of horrors. So it's important, again, that this investigation, of course, is not over. And we just saw on the screen when we were watching Cuomo that Oklahoma Bureau of Investigation, they're diving and searching those ponds. Is that just because they think it's the thing to do, or they have real information that something occurred here? Do they have evidence that something occurred here? So it's horrific. This is a horrific case. And I was going through some of the investigative checklist things that every investigator in a case like this, it should be conducted. I mentioned the fingerprint processing of the scene. How many other bad guys are on this scene? If we can lift prints and identify people from their prints, Jesse McFadden, again, why was he released from prison? Supervision. Who was in charge of him? Did he have a parole officer assigned? And if not, why not? And if he did have one assigned, why didn't the parole officer visit this home? Was Jesse McFadden employed, which is a requirement if you're on parole? You must be employed. And you must visit your parole officer sometimes as often as once a week. This is not okay. We are citizens of this great country. And in this Henreyetta, Oklahoma, the citizens of this community deserve much better than to have a predator among them. Was the community notified when a top-level sex offender was released into the community? Were they notified? And if they weren't, there's another big mistake, a huge mistake. Do they even have a sex offender registry in the Henreyetta, Oklahoma community? Do they have that? Scott Wagner, Matilda, we don't know what training they had or didn't have. If they didn't have any investigative training, then that's a problem. If they did have the training, then they should be fired. Scott, I feel very strongly about this case also, but we cover cases across this great nation, and we see police departments in all different parts of the United States, and there's all different talent levels. There's the greatest police department in the world, which is the NYPD, which I don't think there's any question about that. You have other great police departments, Boston, LA, Miami, Florida, Philadelphia, some of the biggest cities, just outstanding police departments. But then you have these little small police departments that don't get horrific crimes like this, and they perhaps don't have the training necessary to investigate something like this. When I was watching the chief of the local Henreyetta Police Department at the press conference, he was answering questions from the press that I felt he should have just said, I'm not going to answer that, or I don't feel we have the information, or they didn't need to know that. Like very in-depth questions, like how would you like to hear that your loved one in a press conference was shot in the back of the head or shot twice to the back of the head? There's reasons why police departments don't release things like that. And partly it is to spare the families from listening to the horrific things that occurred to their loved ones. And it's, there's another, I want to play something again from Banfield, and it has to do with the cell phones in this case. Let me take this off the screen. I'm going to put this on the screen here. I'm going to play this.
And it seems that every day we find out even more about this horrendous crime.
I'm very interested, Ashley, in the 32 cell phones you mentioned that are registered to that address. The addresses on the cell phone accounts, all 32 of them register back to that ranch address. What does that mean, especially when you bring in the fact that there are a high number of child sexual predators that live right in that area near where the ranch is? I mean, you put the pieces of the puzzle together, everything you've talked about that was found inside the house, the drugs, the pictures of young children in lewd positions, the chains that were tied up on the ground. It was clearly some kind of torture house. And then you wonder why cell phones would be registered there from 32 different people, and that there's this high number of sexual predators in the area. I think we're going to find out a lot more now that they're finally investigating all of this.
Horrific. 32 cell phones registered to that address. I mean, what does that tell you? I mean, could that be a pedophile ring with these 32 cell phones registered to this home? I mean, that is not coincidental. That is a horrific situation. That in itself has to be investigated, has to be hugely looked into. I want to know who owns each one of those cell phones. I want to know the background of Holly Guess, the lady in the middle of this picture here. I want to know what was her involvement. How was she involved in this case? It's a horrific thing, and they have to get to the bottom of this. They can't leave any stone unturned. And that's why if they can't handle it, then they bring in investigators who can. And again, it's a good thing they're bringing in the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation, because I believe they can handle it. It's a state organization, and they shouldn't, law enforcement sometimes have their own fiefdom, and they don't like to ask for help. But I think the FBI should be brought into this case too. And because they can use the help. They could use the resources. When I say resources, the FBI comes with a tremendous amount of money, resources, and agents, and equipment, and technology. So I think they shouldn't be shy, even the Oklahoma Bureau of Investigation, not be afraid to call in the troops. Let's get them all here. This is a potential pedophile ring, child trafficking ring.
That home a series of crimes against children. In fact, if the evidence that's been collected just in the last 48 hours proves to be accurate. And also, we're learning about a real colossal failure of law enforcement, because this was a week ago, and only just over the weekend, almost 7 days after the murders of those 6 people and the suicide of Jesse McFadden, were the state authorities actually there with excavators and drones, and then discovering potentially that the pond, newly created just 2 months ago, might actually yield evidence, possibly more victims, possibly even more bodies, and evidence about the wife who was murdered in this horrible murder-suicide. Well, it's possible now that Holly may have been involved. Evidence collected at the scene much later than police had left it and opened it back up to the public. Evidence now collected shows she may have an integral role, in fact, in the abuse of other children, other victims who may still come to light. We have exclusive videos that were shot by a family member and turned over to us on the Banfield team that we're going to show you tonight, of some of the evidence that was collected and some of the activity on the ranch yesterday and today. The Oklahoma state investigators coming out and looking into containers on the property, RVs on the property. We'll have to apologize for the grainy nature of this video, but this was shot almost hurriedly as the Oklahoma investigators showed up back on the scene with their mobile analysis unit. Medical examiner also appearing on the scene today and spending hours upon hours at that scene. A medical examiner not typically called out to a scene unless there are bodies. Still no announcement from the authorities if in fact they have found more bodies. But the drones flew overhead. Who knows if they had heat seeking? Evidence was processed out of a car. As you can see, the evidence envelopes at this point. Better late than never, I guess. But really, 7, 8 days later, there's the drone. You can just see it flying. They had taken a couple of drones. They brought out all of this heavy equipment, excavators, earth movers, potentially to dig on that property for more bodies. Here are some of the things I can tell you that family members were able to find. And this is after Friday, after they'd been able to actually go through the house the first time. Bloody toddler clothing that was found beneath the floorboards. The blood apparently still wet enough to get on the hands of the person who picked it up from under the floorboards. A 4-inch stack of Polaroids. 4-inch stack of Polaroids of children. VHS tape showing.
You know, folks, something like that, a 4-inch stack of Polaroids of children. Now you have to assign an investigator to try to identify these children in the photographs. Also, let's check them against missing children. Let's get them out there. Let's get them out there on every police teletype in the nation so that they can view these children. Missing person reports, of course. Exploited children, all of these things they have to do. That's part of the investigation. And could you imagine they wanted to just close this case with no further investigation? It's over. Everyone's gone. The case is over. Just horrific.
Possible abuse. A ledger containing the names of children and birth dates. A long piece of lumber that had multiple chains and padlocks attached to it and spaced along the piece of lumber. Multiple phones, 5 of them, in fact, stacked, apparently all Holly's former phones. This piece of lumber, by the way, I should just point out the person who's holding it. That's not a police officer. No, this is evidence of potential sexual crimes in the hands of family members because they found it, not the police. The police didn't bag that up as evidence. The family members had it and photographed it. And
you know, folks, something like that just looks like something from a medieval torture chamber. It's just, you can't even imagine this. And again, I don't want to keep harping upon why was the investigation stopped. Let's start the investigation and do a good investigation now. Let's uh, Leo, crime scene tainted. Yeah, you bet it's tainted, but it's not tainted now to prosecute anyone. It's tainted to find potentially other perpetrators. It's now we want to find who are these children? Are these children missing? Or is there any further victims on these? So we're not at this point concerned with a prosecution. We're concerned with finding people, reuniting people, finding out if anyone else were victims of this horrific, house of horrors here. I don't know what else to call it.
And just beneath, if we can drop our banner on that photograph, just quickly drop the banner, you can count 1, 2, 3 padlocks on those chains on that board. As far as the phones, yes, Holly's former 5 phones, but also 3 other phones. We don't know who owns them, but one additional phone on top of those 3 looked like a child's phone because it had a Panda wallet that was attached to the back, the kind of Panda wallet that a child might actually have on the back of his or her phone.
So, folks, right there, just all the additional investigation that has to be done, the search, the huge search of that property, which happens to be a big property, the potentiality that there were other adult pedophiles visiting this location. I mean, all of that, potentially some of that could be found in the computer, could be found in cell phones, text messages, uh, on Jesse McFadden's phone and Holly Guess's phone. We need to question anyone they associated with. I go deep into, I use the term perpology, and the perp in this Jesse McFadden, and now we also have Holly Guess. We got to look deeply into her background. Who did they hang with? Who did they associate with? And we got to interview all those people. Anyone that how about the kids going to school? Let's talk to their classmates. Let's talk to their teachers. Did they see anything strange? Teachers are mandatory reporters of child abuse, whether it be sexual abuse, physical abuse, neglect, maltreatment. Teachers are mandatory reporters. Let's go to their school and see if any of the teachers heard or noticed anything that would have raised anyone up. All of this has to be investigated. One of the things, this is a horrific case. It really is. And if I sound emotional over this, is because I've seen cases like this, and I've seen the abuse, and I've seen the results of abuse on human beings, and it's a horrific situation. Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, real crime stories. If you like real crime from a police perspective, then you're in the right place. We cover it from our perspective, which is a police perspective. Myself, retired NYPD Sergeant, Phil Grimaldi, retired NYPD Detective, Professor Mike Geary, retired NYPD Sergeant, and a recent addition, Attorney Melanie Little, who is just a gem to have on the show with us. So much knowledge of the law, and just a very pleasant person to listen to, and a wise person. So if you want to, if you're not subscribed to us, please go on our YouTube, hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, and ring that bell. If you want to support us financially, we have a Patreon with 3 different levels, and we also have a YouTube channel membership with 5 different levels. You see the folks in the green font. They're part of our YouTube channel membership family, and we appreciate all the folks we have in our YouTube channel, and also Patreon, and of course joining us by giving us a thumbs up, making comments. We love to read your comments. I try to respond to as many as I possibly can, but this is a community, and we appreciate our fans, our subscribers, our friends. And I want to play a little bit more of the dad, Justin Webster, here.
This should have never happened. A father's search for answers leading him into a house of horrors. Nobody prepared for what was inside or the potential evidence missed by investigators.
That's them.
So,
Hey, that's them.
okay, is
That's
that hers?
Yep. Okay. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on.
Call the sheriff.
Yep.
Don't touch them. Don't move them.
Yep.
Along with Adria Goins, I'm Kevin Ogle, and tonight we are following blockbuster developments in that ghastly murder-suicide that shocked the state and nation, leaving 7 people dead, including 5 children.
Brittany Brewer, Ivy Webster, Tiffany Guess, Michael Mayo, and Riley Allen, all between the ages of 13 and 17, along with Holly Guess, each shot to death.
Investigators have confirmed convicted sex offender Jesse McFadden killed those 6 victims, then himself. Earlier this week, law enforcement released the home where the murders occurred, giving him back to the property owner. And as of Tuesday afternoon, there was no longer an active investigation.
You know, folks, I don't doubt that Jesse McFadden is the killer of everyone, but how do they know that? How did the police did he leave a note saying that he did it? What is the evidence? Because I'm suspect over it now. And I don't doubt that he did it. He certainly has the temperament, and he certainly has the pedigree to do it, a prison inmate. And again, I don't doubt. But how do the investigators know that he did it? And is there a timeline as to when and who and the order in which each person was killed? Do we know any of those things? That should also be part of this investigation. And right now, we don't have answers to that. Perhaps the Oklahoma Bureau of Investigation will come up with some of these answers that the local police, the Henreyetta police, didn't come up with because they were so quick to shut the door on the investigation. So perhaps we'll have answers to this later on.
At this location.
In an effort to figure out what led up to this horrific murder-suicide, the families of the victims have launched their own search for answers.
The parents of teenager Ivy Webster wanted to go through the crime scene, hoping they could find something that would explain what happened. Once the crime tape was removed from the home and the scene released by law enforcement, the family went inside.
They left yesterday devastated by what they found. News 4's Kaylee Olivas with us the entire time. She joins us with an exclusive.
Well, Adria, Kevin, we first want to warn you, the images you're about to see from inside the home are disturbing. It was hard to watch Ivy's family as they discovered what they believe is crucial evidence that was left behind by law enforcement. In a matter of minutes, they found their own daughter's cell phone tucked away in a cabinet, and that was just the beginning. Now they're wondering whether law enforcement dropped the ball.
We can't have parents go through OEF. I'm angry. This should have never happened.
His daughter Ivy was only 14 years old when Jesse McFadden murdered her. Okmulgee police say Ivy died from a gunshot wound to the head. Her family has zero answers, couldn't say goodbye, and has no closure. So now they're looking for it.
I feel that my daughter, even right now, is standing behind me, telling me, Dad, keep going. Keep doing this.
Phone or phone case.
Thursday afternoon, News 4 was invited by Webster and his family to take a closer look at where his daughter took her last breath. Behind these walls, the family found sex and bondage devices. In one of the bedrooms were restraints bolted into the bed frame. There was also a shelf filled with books about witchcraft. 10 feet away in the kitchen, another restraint with chains and locks still attached. Although there were reportedly 4 bodies found in this home, we didn't see any bloodstains, no blood splatters. In the back room, the most shocking find of it all, crucial items that had not been collected.
That's them.
So,
Hey, that's them.
okay, is
That's
that hers?
Yep. Okay. Hold on.
Call the sheriff.
Yep.
Don't touch them. Don't move them.
Ivy Webster's cell phone was tucked away in a laundry room cabinet, along with 2 other cell phones and 2 laptops.
You know, look how good the family was. They spotted their daughter's cell phone. They said, don't touch them, don't move them. They were more concerned with the evidentiary value of what they had just found than the police were. I mean, what's wrong with this picture? You know, they were not served well by this police department. I'll put it that way.
Tops. In the same room, syringes, what appears to be drug residue, and various items the family believes was used to torture their daughter before she was murdered. None of it collected by law enforcement until this family called the Okmulgee County Sheriff's Office and asked them to come back to the home and retrieve these items.
There you go.
Pictures were snapped and the items finally collected, but not without a brief explanation as to why it hadn't been done before.
I want more done.
The problem is we don't know what else to do.
Can you believe that statement? We don't know what else to do. Then what the hell are you doing in this crime scene? You don't have a job in the drugstore as a clerk. You're supposed to be an investigator, a police officer, a sworn police officer. Problem is, you don't know what else to do. Right out of your mouth, you said that? I almost couldn't believe when I heard you say that. Just ridiculous.
Like,
There's a story to be told here.
right.
We don't know what happened.
Don't know what else to do. I'm going to say
And
this.
since we don't have the only person that can tell us what happened,
Is dead. But we can.
No, you know something, officer, detective, you're wrong. What can tell you what happened is the evidence and the crime scene. The crime scene speaks to you long after people are dead. And if you never learn that, you need to go back and get educated because there's no one there that tells you the story. That's where crime scene, the science of a crime scene comes in. That's where collecting evidence, that's where doing an investigation, that's where talking to people, that's where doing a methodical search of this crime scene would come in. For you to raise your hands and surrender is really, really disturbing. And this poor father that had to practically beg you guys just to do your damn job. It's really disturbing. It's really disturbing. And you know something? It's not just this area of Oklahoma. Myself and Duty Ron and some of the other podcasters, we cover cases all over this great country. And there's different levels of talent in police departments all over this nation. And some of them are the best on this earth, like the NYPD, and some are just light years behind, and whether it be resources, finances, training, I don't know what it is, but some of these police departments are operating in the Stone Age.
Can try to piece it
And
together.
I want to say this was not done right. No crime scene tape.
we are open to any suggestions you all can
I'm saying
give.
this.
Okay, he's open to suggestions. Really? You should know what to do. You shouldn't need suggestions. You should be trained on what to do. This is absolutely horrific.
They didn't do their job, and the whole world's going to know it.
But what would this accomplish?
So in other words, he's asking the father of a deceased 14-year-old, what would this accomplish? What would this accomplish is that you should do an investigation on a horrific crime scene where 6 people were murdered. And this is a house of horrors, and you walked away from it like it was a fun house, you know? And he's actually pointing the finger at the father like he's wrong. You know, something's wrong with this police department. Something's very wrong.
I'm a grieving parent that my daughter got raped and murdered. And you're telling me right now that I don't have a right to know what happened? The story's right here.
The story's right there. He couldn't be more correct. The crime scene is telling you the story, and you're refusing to look at it. You're refusing to turn over the rock and see what's under it. Just horrific.
Right here. And it's still sitting here. Still.
Disgusted with the investigation into his daughter's murder, he only saw more uncollected evidence on his walkout. Another phone in the top drawer of a nightstand, several computer towers, and a check made out to a local storage company still sitting in plain sight.
How many folks want to go check out that storage facility? See what's in that storage facility? Isn't that the natural thing to do for an investigator? I'm going to go to that storage facility. I'm going to see what they have stored there. That could be part of this crime scene too. You have to turn over rocks. That's an old expression in investigation. You have to turn over rocks to see what's underneath it. You have to shake the tree in order to see what evidence falls out. This is just unacceptable, totally unacceptable.
Site.
I'm upset, healing, trying to heal, still confused, still a lot of answers that need to be given.
You know, folks, I can't. It's unbelievable. It's really unbelievable what we're seeing here, and hopefully they'll get it right. They can get it right. You know, there's an expression. There's a book. It used to be known as the Bible of Homicide Investigation. It was called Practical Homicide Investigation by Vernon Gebeth, who was a lieutenant squad commander on the NYPD. And one of his favorite expressions was, do it right the first time, because you rarely ever get a second time to do it correctly. And I believe in that. And I tried to live my life by that when I was a boss in Manhattan North Homicide, a boss in the Detective Bureau. Duty Ron, thank you so much for the $20 super sticker. Sergeant, we know the NYPD doesn't do things this way, but this is a black eye on law enforcement. It certainly is. It's upsetting. You know, look, if this is upsetting to me, how do you think it is to John Q. Citizen out there when they see work like this done on this crime scene? How do you think they feel? And how do you think they feel about the profession of law enforcement? Do they have great confidence in it? Or do they just think that, oh, they don't care about their job? They're just collecting a paycheck. That's what it looked like that detective taking the photographs in the video we just saw. Seemed to me that he was just collecting a paycheck. He didn't seem to understand why Justin Webster, the dad of Ivy Webster, why he was upset, why he didn't understand the horrible job they did on this investigation. I don't understand how he didn't understand that this father was upset, that this was not a good job, that they did a horrible job. Infamous truth teller. It makes me so upset because we're supposed to trust the law enforcement and we're supposed to feel safe with them. And we're supposed to hope that our children are going to be safe, and they ask for help. Yes, I agree with you. I cannot defend anything that this police department did. I can't defend their actions. I can't defend their work. Look, when you have a crime scene like this, first of all, it has to be searched methodically. There's so much evidence. There is so much. You have to take your time. You can't go through there and say, oh, I'll take this, I'll take that. You have to go through it methodically with a video camera, videoing every step of the way. And potentially even the NYPD crime scene unit would use laser, and they would use 3D. And the things that they would collect, the forensic tests that a lot of the stuff they're going to collect is going to need is it's after the fact stuff, but it potentially could save people's lives. Do you think that Jesse McFadden, do you think this was his first rodeo? Do you think this was his first picnic? How many people do you think he's victimized in his life? Or while he was out of prison? How many people do you think he's victimized? Look at his face. I mean, he's a criminal. I mean, how many people has this guy victimized? Can you even imagine? I can't. I mean, I just think that's why this investigation is by no means over. In fact, it's just begun. It's just begun. I would love to take a team of investigators from the NYPD and go there. It's like this investigation could save people's lives. And I don't know why this local law enforcement doesn't know this. I mean, just horrible.
3 children and 2 of their friends all shot and killed. The killer then killing himself. A total of 7 bodies were found. News 4's Kaitor K has more details from law enforcement. Kaitor?
The details are extremely difficult to hear. Okmulgee's police chief says all 6 victims had gunshot wounds to the head.
The evidence is that Jesse McFadden murdered 6 people and then killed himself. Beyond,
You know, folks, I would like to know how they know that. I know it sounds academic. It sounds like, oh, he did it. How do they know that? How do they forensically connect him to the killings? Did he leave a note? I would love, that should have been a question that the news people would ask. How do you know he's the killer? How do you know that?
on that, I don't know what his thought process was.
New disturbing details in a case that's horrified the state of Oklahoma and beyond. Okmulgee Police Chief Joe Prentice painting a clearer picture about the 7 bodies found on a rural property in Henreyetta on Monday. Evidence has led them to believe convicted rapist and registered sex offender Jesse McFadden shot his 3 stepkids in the head at his home, as well as 2 teenage girls that were spending the night with his stepdaughter. The chief also saying McFadden shot his wife Holly and himself.
Holly McFadden suffered 3 gunshot wounds to the head, and Jesse McFadden appears to have shot himself in the head.
After 14-year-old,
You know, I had said on yesterday's broadcast, why did the press need to know all of these details? Why did they need to know that? Yeah, well, he referred to her as Holly McFadden. I think they referred to her as Holly Guess. Why did they need to know she was shot 3 times in the head? I'd like to know that. Why wasn't that withheld from the press? What was the necessity of telling that to the press?
Ivy Webster and 16-year-old Brittany Brewer went missing on Sunday. Law enforcement obtained a search warrant for McFadden's home the following day. Southeast of the actual residence, they found the girls' bodies at a creek near the body of 17-year-old Riley Allen. And several hundred feet southeast of that, in a heavily wooded area, the bodies of McFadden, his wife, 15-year-old Michael Mayo, and 13-year-old Tiffany Guess.
Without going into a lot of detail, that scene appeared to be staged to me.
Again, what law enforcement officer would say that? Why would you tell the press that it appeared to be staged? I no reason he should have said that.
I think the bodies had been moved from where they were originally killed.
Again, the press doesn't need to know that. You may think that, Chief, but you don't need to tell the press that.
Chief Prentice saying they still don't know the motive for the killings or the events that led up to them, emphasizing to the community that they'll never get all the answers to this indescribable tragedy.
Normal people can't understand why. People that perpetrate crimes like this are evil. And normal folks like us can't understand why they do that.
We have a link on our website to help the families if you'd like to show your support.
Thanks for joining us here.
Unbelievable, right? Just hard to understand, guys. I think we're getting the point here. It's just first of all, a horrific situation, but to save people's lives in the future, they really need to complete this investigation to find out, are there any more victims out there that haven't reported to police? That's why I say use the press, get his picture, get Jesse McFadden's picture out there, get his wife's picture out there. Again, there she is right there. Get her picture out there. Holly, he was calling her the wife of her, Holly Guess, they were calling her Holly McFadden. Apparently, you know, from what we're hearing, she was complicit in this could be a whole sex ring, pedophile ring with this guy. And again, we in law enforcement know that this investigation has to keep going on. It's not over. You have to keep this investigation going till we have answers. There's no doubt there's other there's other victims here. Cheryl, if he's unknown pedophile, why do they still need a search warrant? Well, look, you still need a search warrant because someone, if you find something that is contraband or illegal in that house, and you can pin it to someone who's not there, the only way that you can use that evidence would be that if it was obtained lawfully. So that's why they would get a search warrant. We would get search warrants even at the home of a deceased person. And just in case, of course, down the road, we could arrest someone for the murder of that deceased person, and that person could claim that they lived at the location and had a right to privacy, and we took their property or their evidence without their consent. So that's why the police cover themselves, and they do get a search warrant in these situations. So, folks, we'll keep following this case, but it's again just a horrific case. Folks, if you're looking for a great attorney in the New York metropolitan area, then Joe Murray is your man. Joe Murray is a retired NYPD police officer, and he's also a fantastic defense attorney. You can reach Joe on his cell at 718-514-3855. You can email him at joe@jmurray-law.com. His website is jmurray-law.com. Joe is a huge supporter of the Police Off the Cuff podcast and also a great friend. Folks, I hope we covered this and we sort of underlined why this is such an important case. Schmitty, thank you so much for the $10 super sticker. The awful sleep I got after watching the replay of yesterday's show pales in comparison to what the family has to go through. Oh, worth it. Thanks for covering this. This is so damn wrong. Absolutely, Schmitty. Thank you so much for being a fan, a subscriber, and a friend of the show. Guys, sometimes we cover these cases that aren't pretty. Well, they're never pretty. It's true crime. Follow the green in your own wood. That's not Holly on the screen. It's his victim. I believe, excuse me, let me just get a picture. This is the mom, Holly Guess, in this picture. Follow the green. I'm sorry if I made a mistake with that. I apologize. But that's her in that picture right there. It's just a horrific case, and we'll do a follow-up. KNS, thank you for the $10 super sticker. Very much appreciated. Guys, I'm seeing some new names in here, and make sure that you are subscribed. Breezy, making it seem as though they thoroughly investigated so no one will question them, when in fact, it might have someone else involved who not wanted their name associated with. Well, that's the whole purpose, Breezy, of doing a thorough and complete investigation, is to, shake the tree, pick up stone, see what's under it, because there could be other victims of this horrific perpetrator here. I'm glad you mentioned this. Believe Holly was complicit in the essay of children. I was attacked for calling her out for putting her children in danger and having others stay over. What was that all about? Inviting other children over. I just, talk about premeditation, and the horror of this just doesn't get any worse than this, I think, Folks, that's about our show today. I want to thank everyone for tuning in. We'll keep covering this case as we get new information. These are the cases that are so important for law enforcement to do a good job. Have a great day, everyone. Bill Cannon from Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories, and God bless.
One episode, just ain't enough.